But of all the strikes this year, the most complex and ultimately the most crippling were those called by Poland's labor union Solidarity. It was a dangerous game the union was playing, presenting demands to the normally unyielding communist government. When Solidarity called for a strike in the middle of a bitterly cold winter, the country was thrown into an economic and political crisis. In December, the communists brought a swift end to the union activities as they placed the entire country under military rule. Press coverage was severed and all dissidents were rounded up. By year's end, the final chapter had yet to be written, but it was not the best of times for Poland. Here at home, we had our own economic headaches too. Although ours didn't reach crisis proportions, no one could say we didn't try. The word in Washington this year was Reaganomics, a mixed bag of budget cuts, tax cuts, and spending cuts. But getting the program past Congress was something else again. This was Ronald Reagan's personal baby, his mandate from the public. Starting from day one, he was ready to pull out all the stops in the battle of the budget.
These United States are confronted with an economic affliction of great proportions. We suffer from the longest and one of the worst sustained inflations in our national history. Well, this administration's objective will be a healthy, vigorous, growing economy that provides equal opportunities for all Americans with no barriers born of bigotry or discrimination.
We know people are going to be directly affected by these cutbacks. Our children, our schools, our senior citizens, the handicapped.
It'll save our country from the brink of economic disaster.
Our bill is, in short, the first real tax cut for everyone in almost 20 years.
They frankly want more for the wealthy and less for the average American family.
I don't think we ever said that our proposals were chiseled in stone, that they were a sacred text that couldn't be altered.
Just the fact that Democrats and Republicans could work together as they have, proving the strength of our system, has created an optimism in our land.
These boys, Graham and Latta, are shooting with real bullets.
And when they hit some of these programs, they're going to kill people.
But he is in no mood to compromise.
I see no compromise at this time, no need for it.
I'm afraid we have some people around here who never met a tax they didn't hike.
What they're doing with the new programs is for the selfish, is for the greedy, is for the affluent.
Of course, they're offering the poor man's tax bill, and we're out to favor the rich. That's why they've gone out of their way to offer 2,500 commodity speculators a tax break of some $400 million.
The administration could not find the slightly more than $1 billion a year to fund the Social Security minimum payments, but they could find $46 billion for the major oil companies.
Why, we never do anything like that.
I've worked with all of them from Eisenhower on forward, and I just know of no president, our party or their party, that's been so willing to meet with members and rationalize their differences.
No president, not Franklin Roosevelt, not Lyndon Johnson, not George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, ever demanded of Congress that we lie down submissively and give him every last scintilla.
You closed the door on America with the Latta bill. I ask you this, bear that in mind. I've been in public life for 46 years. And the day that I have to look at the next election, instead of looking at America, then I don't want to be in public life.
In the end, the Reagan forces proved victorious. But months after the budget was approved by Congress, it turned out that there was one person who still had questions about Reagan's programs. Ronald Reagan's own budget director, David Stockman.
My visit to the Oval Office for lunch with the president was more in the nature of a visit to the woodshed after supper. In our meeting, I told the president that I would not permit my own careless rambling to a reporter to stand in the way of the success of his presidency or the credibility of his program.
January, Beverly Hills bank officials uncovered $21 million embezzlement scheme.
We are afraid that we may lose
very close to $20 million on this before we're through.
I'm not worried about Wells Fargo at all. They don't want in trouble, not me. They're going to pay me. I mean, you know, I knew I'd be rich one day, but I didn't think I'd be like that.
When you get to the end of the year, you run into a lot of popularity contests. For instance, the most popular song of the year was Betty Davis' Eyes. The most popular injury of the year was a tender swelling on the volar surface of the left metacarpal phalangeal joint, also known as Cuber's thumb. And the movie that sold the most popcorn in 1981 was, of course, that recycled Saturday matinee Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Academy Award in 1981 went to a so-called small movie, Ordinary People. But most of this year's movies featured characters that were anything but ordinary. Superman, Tarzan, The Lone Ranger, Zorro, and Joan Crawford all inspired movies in '81. Another one of the year's big entertainment events happened on TV. It was a mini-series that took place in a Los Angeles courtroom. It featured an all-star cast, and it was publicized in 7-Eleven stores all over the country.
I was working in New York, and the phone rang, and it was Charlene Beatty, who was my husband's secretary and a friend of ours, and she said words to the effect, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Why?" It was in the morning, and she said, "Well, I'm going to read you something." And she read that. I got very, very angry. I started to cry. I started to shake. Then I calmed down, and I called my lawyer. And I said, I'm going to sue. These are bad guys.
Did Miss Burnett at any time appear to you to be intoxicated?
No.
There was no sign of any intoxication or of any raucous behavior.
Both of her parents were alcoholics, and they died as a result of the consequences of that problem. As a result, Miss Burnett, through her career, has undertaken to work in projects having to do with anti-alcoholism. She's given her time, her expense, and of herself. And then, in the plainest of words, she's called a drunk.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find for the plaintiff, Carol Burnett, and against the defendant, National Enquirer, Incorporated, and assess punitive damages in the sum of $1,300,000.
If they had given me $1 plus car fare, I would have been happy, because it was the whole principle.
The verdict is an affront to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Carol Burnett's victory seemed to point the way toward more integrity in celebrity journalism. A month later, another female star was again put under the microscope of public scrutiny. Billie Jean King was slapped with a palimony suit in Los Angeles, brought against her by a former lover.
I did have an affair with Marilyn Barnett. It's been over for quite some time, and I'm very disappointed and shocked that Marilyn has done this not only to herself in a very self-destructive way, but to other people who have cared for her.
At issue was the possession of Miss King's Malibu beach house, from which Ms. Barnett was being evicted. Although supported by the pro-tennis world for her courage and honesty, Billie Jean claimed that some of her long-standing endorsement contracts were going unrenewed.
I've always felt it's very important that people have their privacy, and unfortunately, someone in my life doesn't think it's very sacred.
March. Walter Cronkite bids farewell to the evening news.
And that's the way it is. Friday, March 6, 1981. I'll be away on assignment, and Dan Rather will be yours. Good night.